she feels and how she is seeking justice for Geronimo.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today.
It's not on, it's not on.
And
That's it.
can you all hear me?
Yes.
Thank you so much for being here today. And for all of those at home who couldn't make it, I know you're all here in spirit. I have had thousands of emails, cards, messages, texts. I can't tell you what the last 6 weeks has been like. Today, I would like to read a press statement that we issued a short while ago first, and then I would like to tell you in my own words what the last 4 years have been like. I promise not to take ages over it, but it's important that you all hear it. So, the press statement is entitled Geronimo the Alpaca. Preliminary post-mortem findings show that Geronimo did not have bovine TB.
Okay, quiet, please.
Let her carry on. I also call for the Secretary of State, George Eustace, to resign. Geronimo the Alpaca, executed by Defra on Tuesday the 31st of August, did not have bovine tuberculosis according to the preliminary findings of the post-mortem. Not a surprise. Geronimo was brutally removed from his farm and executed despite alternative scientific proposals being submitted and received by Defra, with requests for all parties to seek an outcome which delivered on both the government's bovine TB policy objectives and the objective of keeping a healthy animal alive. These proposals were consistently ignored by the government, despite my unrelenting professionalism, evidenced by exemplary practices at my farm, and the commitment to improve bovine TB policy. The government have consistently refused to engage in a transparent and cooperative manner. Immediately following the deeply traumatic removal of Geronimo on the 31st of August, I formally requested information regarding how, when, and where Geronimo was put to death. And I requested the presence of an independent, expert, and fully qualified witness at the post-mortem. This request was immediately denied and flatly refused by the government on the same day. On that same day, I also formally requested the full results of the post-mortem on Geronimo, once again beseeching the government to be fully transparent. On Friday the 3rd of September, a letter was received from the government legal department containing only the preliminary findings of the post-mortem, as reviewed by Dr. Ian McGill, behind me, here he is, and Dr. Bob Broadbent, Geronimo's vet. The preliminary gross post-mortem findings are negative for visible lesions typical of bovine tuberculosis. For clarity, not everyone knows what you might find in there, but for clarity, there are no white or cream caseous enlarged abscesses typical for TB in alpacas, whether in the lungs, the bronchial, mediastinal, or retropharyngeal lymph nodes. I formally requested the full findings of the post-mortem report, which is Form TB50, together with all relevant documents and the results of further tests on tissue samples, blood, serum, or plasma taken or obtained from Geronimo, along with any further test results, including Enfoplex, IDEX, Actiphage, and any other, sorry, I'm fiddling with my phone here, any other PCR or interferon gamma tests performed by Defra. along with the results of histopathological examination. I have further requested that both fresh, frozen and formalin-fixed tissue and fluid samples be preserved and provided to an independent expert to carry out further tests. To date, the government has refused to provide this information, despite multiple requests on the 31st of August and again on the 7th of September. The government legal department, in a letter received earlier today, claimed that as various teams across Defra and AFA are involved in preparing a response, our client is not in a position to revert by the time unreasonably expected. They have
Disgrace! Defra disgrace! Defra disgrace!
They have once again refused to provide me with a contact person at Defra or APHA. Me and my supporters remain deeply concerned about the standards of integrity and transparency adopted by Defra throughout this 4-year ordeal and the manner in which the execution and the post-mortem have been conducted. We urge the government to act with compassion and cooperation, which to date has been severely lacking, creating deep and unnecessary distress to Geronimo, me, and all of you, the supporters. And I include the press in that because what we witnessed last week was disgusting.
Disgusting. Defra is corrupt! Justice must resign!
In light of the Secretary of State, George Eustace, stating that he had read all of the scientific evidence and was satisfied that the TB tests were 99% accurate, when in fact they were not, by perpetuating Defra's kill first, investigate later bullying regime, and by refusing to engage with any other possible solution presented to him, we call on the Secretary of State to tender his resignation immediately. I'm not done. Bit more. The role of Dr. Christine Middlemiss, the UK's Chief Veterinary Officer of the Government Veterinary Services, is also being called into question. I have raised my concerns with the Royal College of Veterinary Surgeons, requesting an investigation into her professional conduct. Furthermore, I have made a request under Freedom of Information Act seeking full disclosure of what actually transpired in relation to Geronimo. We are confident that if this request is complied with, then the full extent of the gross incompetency and disingenuous nature of Defra will be exposed. That's the end of the press statement.
I'd just like to call for a round of applause for Helen McDonald, one of the most bravest and courageous people around. A lot of people have said to me in the media here in Britain, America and other parts of the world, why is it that we got so passionate and angry about this alpaca? Why did Geronimo become such a big story? Was it just a bit of summer madness? No, it was never summer madness, because it wasn't just about Geronimo. This story was about Helen. It was a story about a courageous individual that's fought with the government for 5 years for what is right. Wouldn't you agree? It's a story about care and compassion for animals in this country that unites a very divided nation and makes me very proud to be British. Wouldn't you agree? And ultimately, It's a story about the decades of incompetence, negligence and deceit on TB policy that go back in this department. Would you agree? Defra had an opportunity, and so did the National Farmers Union next door here, to get behind Helen and say, yes, you're absolutely right. Your alpaca needs a decent TB test, a phage PCR test. But farmers need that test as well, because we must accurately find TB in cattle and alpacas. Would you agree? Because unless we can do that, we will never ever end this tragedy for our farming industry, for alpaca owners, and for our precious badgers. Would you agree? The tragedy of bovine TB is there is a solution. The government have actually been consulting on new methods of scientific analysis for tests, biosecurity measures and vaccination of cattle for months, but they haven't even had the decency to actually respond and publish their call for views. Do you think that's acceptable? No! Within that call for views, there's a section looking at phage PCR, how valuable it is to farmers, how valuable it will be to alpaca owners, and why Helen is quite rightly so angry that she was never able to test Geronimo when he was alive under that test. Would you agree? Yes! And I'm afraid what happened on her farm just over a week ago was one of the most brutal incidents of animal crime in this country that I have ever witnessed. Would you agree? In any normal circumstances, the police would not have been defending the perpetrators. They would have been arresting them. Would you agree? The fact that this was sanctioned by a government department, the Chief Vet and the Secretary of State, does not make it right. Would you agree?
Eustace out!
The fact remains that the death of this animal, Geronimo, will not be in vain. Because what Helen has done, she has brought tension back in this country to what has been an absolute tragedy in government policy when it comes to farming and the environment, that has led so far to the destruction of over 140,000 badgers, and due on yesterday's announcement from the government, 7 more licenses, probably another 60 or 70,000 to die this year, in the biggest mass destruction of a protected species ever recorded in this country. Do you think that's right?
Disgusting!
In one of the most nature-depleted countries on earth, ladies and gentlemen, we are pushing badgers to the verge of extinction in parts of the country where they've inhabited since the Ice Age. Are any of you proud of that? No! It's a national disgrace, ladies and gentlemen, and it puts a cart and horses through any government commitment to turn this nation into a world leader on animal welfare. Wouldn't you agree? Yes! So what Helen has done, she's lit a fuse that's going to blow a hole in this department. That is going to end the deceit, that is going to end the lies, that is going to bring about a fundamental shift in this policy, because it's like a deck of cards, it's all beginning to go out. Wouldn't you agree? Now, I've spent the last 4 or 5 weeks as Ian has, and you'll hear from him in a moment, working with Helen MacDonald and Pen Farthing, 2 of the most bravest, courageous people I've ever known in this country. But the one thing that unites them, fighting for an alpaca in Gloucestershire, or fighting to get people and animals out of Kabul, is a love of animals, a love of people, a belief in humanitarian and animal welfare that I think all of us can be proud of. Wouldn't you agree? Yes! And the Spectator in their front page this week, and I debated with them on this, said that the growth of the animal lobby, the animal welfare lobby, the animal rights lobby, which they hold me and others responsible for, is a dangerous thing. It's a force for evil. It's a force for bad. Well, I'll tell you this. I believe that animal welfare and animal rights is as important for moving mankind forward as the anti-slavery movement, the universal suffrage movement, and the civil rights movement. Would you agree? Because in years to come, we will look back in horror how we treated animals in our farming system. We will look at horror how we treated animals when we tested on them. We'll look back in horror how we allowed the shooting, exploitation and killing of animals, from fox hunting to badger culling to badger baiting to grouse shooting. All of it is disgusting, all of it is cruel, and the vast majority of caring, compassionate people in this country want to see it end, and that is something that makes me very proud. Wouldn't you agree?
Yes!
So Geronimo is a burning light of hope. His death is not in vain. Helen has done amazing things and has brought an army of caring, compassionate people together. And that army will continue to fight on all the issues that matter to all of us. Because this is a country that can be proud of caring about animals. This is a country that has a long track record of doing it, and we're never going to stop it. And no politician, from George Eustace to the Secretary of State, Mr. Wallace, or anyone, is going to get in our way. We are going to win these battles. We are going to find justice for Geronimo, and we will end the cruel, barbaric Badger Cull. Thank you very much. Now, what I'd like to do before I hand over to Ian McGill, a real hero of mine who has plenty to say, and we almost listened to him, is hand over to a journalist. We've had some good support in the media. Have you got more to say? Okay, I've got a few more words from Helen, then I'll hand over.
Yeah, sorry, it's me again. I wanted to just say something personal about the last 4 years and what I've endured. Today, I had really hoped I would be standing before you, relieved and grateful that after 4 years of trying to show a simple truth, Defra and George Eustace had finally chosen a better way. Instead, they chose slaughter rather than creation. The possibility of the creation of the first mRNA vaccine against bovine tuberculosis. Geronimo was to be the figurehead of a proposal which would have helped create a BTB vaccine, first in animals and then in people. However, today I stand before you without Geronimo, but resolute. What Geronimo meant and what he still stands for is to demand that facts and science lead our policymakers, not outmoded thinking and prejudice. The bullies in Defra who abuse their positions today still have not had the courage to be honest. They hide behind the government legal department, cowering and pathetic.
Shame on Defra.
APHA vets tortured Geronimo and still refuse to tell me how he died. They hide in plain sight behind misleading claims which you, the public, have all seen straight through. Defra and APHA manipulated test protocols because they could. They have written laws without parliamentary scrutiny because they could. They threw tantrums when they could not dissuade me from their chosen path. In desperation, they blamed New Zealand in 2018 when they still could not get Geronimo dead. They threatened and intimidated me and others. It did not work. More recently, they wheeled out experts who knew nothing about the facts of the case, let alone camelids. The only constant in all of this was Geronimo himself. He watched as people in power came and went. Unfortunately, George Eustace came back and we were stuck with his ignorance, incompetence and silence. There is a long list of people who contributed to the barbaric torture and murder of Geronimo 8 days ago. George Eustace, Christine Middlemiss, the Chief Veterinary Officer, Michael Gove, Theresa May was Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, still Prime Minister, Lord Gardiner of Kimball, the Biosecurity Minister, and Lord Fennion, who had every opportunity to stop this. They tortured me for 4 years simply for asking a fair question. They could not make me consent to kill a healthy animal. So in vengeful desperation, they chose to torture and destroy Geronimo in front of the world. Why? Why? To punish me for daring to question their dogma and dishonesty. They set me me up as an example of how you must never challenge Defra. If you do, they will damage you by whatever means to ensure you are stopped. Well, you have not damaged me, Defra, and you won't stop me, the UK government. The torture continues. I have asked how, when and where Geronimo died. Nothing. No answers. I have constantly asked for the results of his post-mortem findings. All I have is a summary of the initial examination. That shows, just like the other 9 camelids that we know have died, that there were no signs of TB on visual inspection. Defra say Geronimo must have been infected over 6 years ago in New Zealand, yet not one sign of TB on post-mortem. And the other results? We want to know those too. They have done other tests and taken samples, and nothing has been shared with me to date. I wonder why, and that makes me really angry.
Yes!
Geronimo was the innocent victim of arrogance, ignorance, ego, and greed. All who looked the other way and did nothing to stop this, hang your heads in shame. You were warned of the backlash by the electorate if you touched Geronimo. You did it anyway. Defra have always had choices, several over 4 years, and a further one on the very morning that they descended to slaughter him. They failed to take those choices. I always made it very clear I would not give consent for the euthanasia of a healthy animal, and I stand by that. Defra made the choice to torture him, to remove him by force without any knowledge or care. They should have provided trained, competent vets. They did not. Defra is a shambles that breeds ignorance and dishonesty. Tom has already told you 140,000 badgers, soon to be 200,000 if they get their way. Millions of cattle, at least 9 camelids, of which we are aware of, that died the same way as Geronimo through multiple priming of an unvalidated test. I would just like to say there are some honourable professional vets within the APHA, but they live in fear and they live in frustration, ruled by egotistical idiots for whom money and ego is all-encompassing. For those who are outraged and traumatised, rise to the challenge with us and speak up for good. Finally, Geronimo was a blessing in my life. He touched the world. He was loved and was precious to very many people. And he lives on. I miss him, but I will do him the honour of fighting for him and making sure his legacy lives on for all animals.
Thank you. Thank you, Helen. I know how difficult that is, but your bravery and your courage shines through. Thank you so much. The media have been a key player in this story, and often we can be very critical about them. But I want to say thank you to one particular journalist, Kevin O'Sullivan, both for how he's covered this story, Geronimo, but also for all the time he's covered on Operation Ark, which has taken up so much of mine and Ian's time over the last 2 weeks as well. He's here today. He's got a few words to say, so thank you so much, Kevin O'Sullivan.
I'm not as eloquent as Tom, so I've written something out. The shocking scenes last week when a terrified little alpaca called Geronimo was led screaming to his death by a government execution squad ludicrously dressed in sinister-looking hazmat suits were a disaster for the Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs and its current Secretary of State, George Eustace. Splashed all over the front pages the following day, this sickening circus of cruelty crystallised the suspicion that when it comes to perceived animal health issues, Defra's default setting is to kill, kill, kill. Ever since the obscenity of the genocide of 6.5 million cattle, sheep and pigs incinerated on grotesque burning bonfires of flesh in the 2001 foot and mouth scare, a mass extermination subsequently deemed to have been unnecessary, Defra has been struggling to shake its image as the Ministry for Mass Murder. After 8 bloody years, the horrible Badger Cull, 200,000 dead and counting at an astronomical cost so far of £100 million, appears to achieve nothing in controlling bovine TB in cattle. And quite what Mr. Eustace and his top team, those swish officers behind us, think they achieved by making such a vile spectacle of taking Geronimo to his slaughter remains a baffling mystery. Bovine TB or not TB? That is the question. Did Geronimo have this serious illness? When the poor thing was fighting for his life, as the police stood there witnessing a clear case of criminal cruelty, he seemed in the rudest of health. How could that be so if he really had not been suffering from bovine TB for 4 long years? If he really did have this highly infectious disease, how come he didn't pass it on to a single other animal in his vicinity? All Geronimo's owner, Helen MacDonald, was asking for was one more test. That would have settled the issue. But at Defra, the computer said no, and so did George Eustace. What was he afraid of? That an innocent creature might have tested negative, that his ministry might have looked weak in failing to pursue its favourite policy of kill, kill, kill. We're calling for a recalibration of the Defra murdering mindset. We demand an end to this strange belief that we have the right to treat animals as if they're inferior, unimportant beings that have no right to a decent life. We've got to learn to share this planet with our 4-legged friends. Intellectual superiority does not make us... Intellectual superiority does not make us better than animals. It bestows upon us a responsibility not to abuse and mistreat them, a responsibility that too many of us fail to understand. While the likes of Mr. Eustace and his acolytes look upon the likes of us as sentimental troublemakers who don't understand the crucial nature of extermination, here's my prediction. In 50 years' time, it will be them on the wrong side of history, not us. The human race will look back on our appalling mistreatment of animals in the same way as we look back on slavery now. It's a matter of basic decency. As I covered the Geronimo story on my show on Talk Radio, as well as the inspirational story of Pen Farthing's heroic rescue of 170 needy animals from Kabul, in the remarkable humanitarian mission dubbed Operation Ark, it became clear to me that there are people who harbour an almost obsessive desire to demonstrate their dominion over animals, as if they're the master race and they have to prove it. The trophy hunter syndrome. It's a weird kind of aggressive speciesism. Why would anyone object to saving animals in need? This woeful worldview must not be allowed to prevail. Please listen to the better informed, more impressive speakers here today. This is an important memorial for a much-loved alpaca whose happy life was ruthlessly terminated, whose happy life we don't believe needed to end. This is a protest against the barbaric killing of Geronimo. This is a protest against the unthinking killing of animals as if their lives do not matter. They do. And when we can get George Eustace and his hazmat-suited cronies to comprehend this, perhaps we can all begin an essential journey into a better world. Justice for Geronimo. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Kevin. What can I say? We're so grateful for your support. I'm now going to hand over to a man who's worked tirelessly over the last few weeks, defending Geronimo, also flying out to help animals get out of Kabul, also managed his surgery and constantly talking to me and others about the media and dealing with politicians. One of the most inspiring animal welfare vets in this country, anywhere in Europe in my view. Dr. Ian McGill, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dom. And can I just say a big shout out of respect to Dominic Dyer, amazing campaigner, who has really held this campaign together. He does fantastic work. So, Geronimo, I'm sure we're all very sad about what happened to our friend Geronimo. In the oxygen of publicity, someone at Defra thought that was an appropriate response. I think that just shows you how much Defra are out of touch. I mean, what can you say? That was an absolute disgrace. They had no idea how to handle him. They chased him around the paddock and got him really stressed. They got him into a corner. They put the wrong head halter on that could stop him from breathing, and they dragged him into that van. You know, if that was me, I'd have never have done it for a start. But if that was me, and that was a wild animal, it would have been darted. If that was an alpaca or a deer, it would have been darted. So it was peacefully done, if it has to be done. But of course, we now know it didn't have to be done, don't we? We now know that the post-mortem, as we always knew it would be, is negative for lesions of bovine TB. So the other thing I just want to say about Geronimo's results is there was a lot of people, Defra officials, Mr. Eustace, Defra officials I can't name, who said that the specificity, the chance of getting it wrong, was 99.3%. Well, that is true. Only if you take a blood sample without using priming. So Geronimo was primed with tuberculin. Tuberculin is a rough protein soup of M. bovis, the bacteria that causes TB, and it generates all sorts of antibodies. So then they measured antibodies, and lo and behold, Geronimo's got antibodies. So we wrote a letter to the Times and the Veterinary Times, and they published it, showing that the specificity, rather than being 99%, was 20%. That's right, 20%. 80% false positives. Now we put this in the press and in the veterinary press. It was everywhere, the BBC, ITV, Sky, everywhere. We called for a grown-up conversation with Defra, the chief vet, Mr. Eustace, farmers, stakeholders, to sit down and sort this out and find another way forward. We could have learned a lot more with a live Geronimo than a dead one. But we didn't get a grown-up conversation. We got an execution squad. A death squad in the full glare of the oxygen of publicity. The biggest PR disaster that Defra has ever made. So let's just talk about the people at Defra. So the vast majority of the people at Defra, they're like me and you. Sometimes they agree with what their organisation does, sometimes they don't. A lot of people up there in this building much rather be down here with us criticising Defra. We're not there. But when you come down later, we've got some vegan snacks and some wine and beer for you. If you want to come and join us, come and join us. So let me tell you about Defra. There's obviously some, fairly mentally deranged people at the top of Defra. But no, a lot of people in there are trying to do the right thing. So let's talk about Defra. Me and Don both used to work for the forerunner of this map. That's probably why we're so devastating for him. We know what it's like. We've been in there. Well, I was at the Central Vet Lab, but Don was around. We know how it works. A lot of people are trying to do the right thing and they're getting knocked back by their superiors. So we know how it works. So in particular, the poor scientists at Defra are censored. They publish work, goes up the chain, and then it gets censored. And I'll come back to that. So they're not able to speak the truth. They're ordered to do things they don't want to do. So, talked a little bit about pen farthing earlier on. So what happened, I do have to tell you a little story. So what happened, it's all Geronimo's fault, the pen farthing we managed to get those dogs out. It was Geronimo who did that. So me and Dom were flat out working on Geronimo, and you know, with Dom it's like a DJ mixing things up, you know. And I'm not so bad myself. So between us, we ended up with the biggest story in the world somehow, and obviously a lot of that was Helen. And quite a bit of it was me and Dom. So I ring Dom up on one Saturday to talk about Geronimo, and Dom says, "Oh, Ian, there's this other problem. There's these vets and vet nurses and all these dogs and cats stuck in Afghanistan. We need a vet. You're good with me. Come on board." And I was like, "Okay then." So by Monday, we didn't have anything. That Monday we started. We didn't have anything. The veterinary profession, you know, the president of the RCVS and the BVA called me. The BVA normally are the people I'm arguing with, and I got full support from them. So then we didn't have any support. Guess which department was the first department to support us to get those dogs out? Defra. So Defra, and I can't thank them enough. HARC, APHA and Defra, you wouldn't normally hear me say that. Big thanks to them. But that is only one side of this hydra here. This is a two-headed hydra. You know, without them, we wouldn't have got the Home Office, the MOD, the Foreign Office, and everybody to work with us to get those dogs out. And we're still working on getting those staff off. And out of the country, I can't say too much about that. And then we've got over there, we've got the NFU. Why aren't they down here listening to us about not having their animals killed? About working to get proper testing for their cows? That would be a much more sensible thing to do. So, we've also got vegan snacks and wine and beer, so if you come out and you want to talk to us, then that'll be fine. So, whilst me and Dom are doing this, and we're in the full flow of Geronimo and then now Zed, somebody in Defra thought, well, me and Dom are struggling to get women and children and babies out of Afghanistan. Someone in Defra who thought it would be a really good idea to kill Geronimo, who's under my care. Now, I think that's positively psychopathic, because they did that in the full glare of the media, the world media. Now don't forget, there's loads of children watching this. Can you imagine what lesson that's taught them? You know, what lesson, and their parents that are lost to work, with people, millions of people, hundreds of millions of people, suddenly why did they kill him? What's wrong with the British government? Why did they do that?
Name and shame the bastard.
So, that's Geronimo, what a tragedy. But he has shone a shining light. So let's talk about the Badger Cull. Now I'm not going to bore you with all the science of the Badger Cull, we've rehearsed it many times. I'm just going to bring you the new stuff. You all know about the Badger Found Dead survey showing that hardly any of them have TB that was suppressed for 2 years. You know about the papers that have been put out that are based on modelling that just frame badgers. I'm not going to talk any more about that. What I am going to tell you is about our research that's on the point of publication. And what that shows is not looking at little modelled areas, looking at the whole high-risk area for bovine TB. And you look at culled areas, and you look at unculled areas. Guess what? No difference whatsoever, except slightly higher in the culled areas. Cows get slightly more TB in the culled areas. Oh, fancy that. So the whole policy, it's cost nearly £100 million, is a total disaster. And they want to kill another 60,000 badgers. I don't think so. So, so that's the kind, you know, we're on the verge of publishing that. So worse than that, Brian Jones, a retired immunology professor, put in a request, I think probably last year, saying, this is an obvious thing to do. Why don't you do this with the culled and unculled areas? So here's what they said. They said that they would have to spend 46 hours doing this, and therefore it was too expensive. So they spend 100 million on badger culling. They spend 100 million each year killing cows, killing alpacas, killing anything that moves that is inconvenient for them. But they don't want to spend 46 hours. So here's my challenge to Defra. You've got 3 days. You've got till Monday morning. I want to see your 46 hours of work. You've got all the data. Run it through a computer. We want to see it. That's my first challenge. Defra have got a serious PR problem here. They've made the worst decision and worst mistake they could ever possibly make. And that's another problem for them. Sorry about that. So, and then there's the cost-benefit analysis. So just let me tell you about that. What they do every year, they do a cost-benefit analysis. Now, what they do is they say, oh, we did this model study 20 years ago. If it behaved like that, we'd have saved money. Trouble is, they haven't saved any money because the prevalence, the percentage of animals that have, the percentage of herds that have TB, exactly the same as it was in 2011. So they've saved no money for all this, £100 million on badgers, £100 million a year on killing cows. We'd like to see the actual cost-benefit analysis of how much this has cost, not how much they've saved. And that's another 3 days on Monday, please. Defra. So there's some other things. There's some other things for Defra that are going to come out in the next couple of days. And you know, we don't want to give everything away at one go, but it's going to be about the censorship of government scientists. I used to work for MAF. I worked with the guy that discovered BSE. And if we talk about evil twin Defra on the large animal side and good Defra on the small animal side, the diseased cow in cows jumped into cats. And when me and Joe were writing a paper, I came back with black lines through it. I was only 20-something, and my mouth was open, and I said, I know a hell of a lot, and you know the most in the world about this disease, why are they putting black lines through it? And he said, let's write back to them. And so he spent ages faxing back and forth with our superiors. And I've got those documents. And I submitted those to a public inquiry after I released them to dispatches, and the judge didn't see them. He didn't see the whole dossier I submitted. But strangely, that's still somewhere locked up, very safe, with various lawyers as well. So we'll see what happens with those over the next few days. And the other thing is, Helen's worried about them getting rid of her tissue. Okay, so someone decided, okay, we'll look at hunting hounds. Now, we've had hunting hounds having TB, they get fed raw meat. Back in the 80s and the 70s, a strange condition arose called hound ataxia. Now, I thought, that's interesting. BSE, and these animals were fed down a cow, so I thought I'd look at it. Lo and behold, BSE in dogs. Now, because this tissue wasn't very well prepared, well conserved, because it had been bashed around and dead hounds sent in, they said, oh, it was equivocal, even though there was electron microscope findings of the typical papillomonic, the typical pointing things called scraper-associated fibrils in that tissue. So they didn't let me publish it, they didn't let anyone publish it, and then they wrote a memo saying they've destroyed the tissue because it was taking up space. So BSE in dogs, never revealed. BSE in cats, it was too much out there, they couldn't suppress it. So those documents are going to come out. So, you've got a lot of problems. There's another problem for them, which is I am now throwing my protective care as a vet around every single badger in England with my new Badger veterinary cert. So let me tell you how the Badger Veterinary Service works. The Badger Veterinary Services works with all our allies all over the country, all of those vets who don't like badgers being killed. If they want to treat a badger, they need to give me a call and say, is it all right to treat those badgers, Ian? I say, of course it is. You don't need to call me again, we know you're doing good work. If a vet calls me, however, and says, I'd like to go out at night shooting badgers or organise a cull company to kill badgers, they don't have my permission. So if they do that, that is a crime against the Veterinary Surgeons Act and they'll be reported to the RCVS. So this department here, I'm talking about dismembering the evil twin head. Dom talked about putting a bomb under it. This department's, trust me, this department is going down. Trust me. So before, this used to be called the Ministry of Agriculture, Fisheries and Food, and then after I released all the stuff about government lying, they called an inquiry, they changed it to Defra. Now Defra, I think there's depth to Defra. What I want this to be called is the Environment, Food and Animal Protection Office, EFAPO. Partly because it sounds like a guerrilla movement from Angola, but also it's got the word office in it, and that makes it a great office of state, like the Foreign Office and the Home Office. So this should be a great office of state. Look after our food, look after our animals, look after our people. I want this expanded but I want it taken over by the good head of Defra. The APHA and HARC and APHA and Defra, who helped us with those dogs and care, they need to take over this building. So instead of it being next to the NFU, maybe it should go over there and we should have the RSPCA, the Compassion in World Farming. Let's make this square. All to do with animal protection and food protection, environmental protection. And of course supporting farmers, they're part of the food. So is it, so are all these other things. It's not just about farmers, it's about everyone, but we want farmers on board. Come and find a new deal where your animals aren't slaughtered. We've got the plans for that, I won't go into them now. But it involves not testing as much and not slaughtering anything. So there's a problem for Defra. Big PR disaster, lots of scientific evidence, lots of legal evidence. Helen's got reams of it, I've got reams of it, Dom's got reams of it. So unfortunately, there are going to be criminal charges. There are going to be disciplinary procedures, as Helen outlined. So here are the charges. Scientific fraud, systemic scientific fraud perpetrated, forced on Defra scientists and some independent scientists who I'm not going to talk about. Financial fraud. So you've heard about this policy as a gravy train, £100 million of your money a year not getting on top of TB. No scrutiny, no attempt to find out if it's worked. Distressing farmers like Helen, but that's happening everywhere. So the next Geronimo's already there. We already know who the alpacas are who are on death row. We already know the next Daisy, the next Buttercup. Because what we understand now through Geronimo is it's those images of animals that get everyone inside. They're real people, they've got a name. They're not just a faceless cow. So we will do this relentlessly, animal after animal after animal, until we've won, until we're winning. So there's a fair warning for you, Defra. The next Geronimo is already on the way. And of course the final charge is systemic animal abuse on an industrial scale. So that is 140,000 badgers killed unnecessarily, and they want to kill another 60,000 more. Well, how big do you want the charges to be, guys? The murder of Geronimo, obviously. 5,000 alpacas over the last 10 years. 300,000 cows, and it's not getting anywhere. The disease is just not going down at all. So, those things are going to happen, unfortunately. Of course, if anybody guilty, or not quite guilty, was forced to do anything, wants to come down here and talk to us, and have some vegan snacks and some wine and beer, you can do that at any point. And if you want to join the right side of history, come and join the right side of history, because you know we've won, don't you? So I think that's just about all I've got to say. Defra, come on board with us. So remember, there's two sides to Defra. We want to decapitate the evil twin, large animal side of Defra, and we want the rest of Defra to move in. We want a bigger building to be one of the great offices of state, to protect us, our food and our animals, and that's what we want to see. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ian McGill. Just a final point from me, because he makes a very good point. I worked in this place for 13 years. The problem with Defra is it's set up not to protect the environment, it's set up to protect industry, to exploit and destroy the environment. And there's a simple solution to that. The organisation next door, the National Farmers Union, or the agrochemical industry that I used to work in, or the food manufacturing industry that I used to work in, or other sectors of business from fisheries and other exploitive industries, should not have full control over this department. The people should have control. The taxpayers should have control. The people that care about the future of our countryside, our landscapes, in the most nature depleted country in Europe, should have control. ultimately, unless we take back control, we will have no wildlife, no biodiversity, and no natural landscapes left in a generation. It will all be gone. And you're going to accept that? No! So that's why the fight to end the Badger Cull, that's why the fight for justice for Geronimo is so important. It's about the future of a landscape and a world that we've taken for granted and destroyed in the 50 years I've been alive, and we've got to set right. We have the power to do it, but we've got to pull the levers and change the very nature of government to make it work. And always remember, that's what you're fighting for. Thank you very much. I'm going to bring people out in and we're going to kick it.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Dr. Colleen McDouling, and I'm an animal scientist. And I've been very much on board with this, and I've been supporting Helen. I'm also a published author and a poet. Now, before Geronimo's death, I wrote a poem, and I've had numerous requests to read it out at this demonstration. It will be paraphrased a little bit, because he's now deceased. I'm also representing the South African Alpaca Society, who has been very much on board with this throughout. And they have been of huge support to Helen and Geronimo throughout these 4 years. The visuals that were broadcast on South African television absolutely horrified my country. So without further ado, I would like to dedicate this poem to Helen. To our beloved late Geronimo. And also for all camelids here and abroad. For Geronimo. Geronimo, Geronimo, you have captured our hearts. Your plight to our souls compassion imparts. Little alpaca, we are fighting for you. Geronimo, Geronimo, to your cause we are true. We are seeking for justice. We are seeking for truth. We want no more lies. So Defra, be couth. Come to the table transparent and clean. Admit you are wrong. Admit you are mean. The evidence mounted up. You've made a mistake. Defra, get with it. What you say is fake. Give Helen her say. Allow her to speak. She knows the real science. Your claims are so weak. Killing our friend has proved nothing at all. Couldn't you see he's healthy? Your minds were so small. You don't have a conscience, and you're causing much strife. Do the right thing, and give Geronimo his life. Geronimo, Geronimo, the world stands with you. We saw you on live stream, and our numbers were not few. We're sending our love, our light, and our hope to you and to Helen, and we pray she can cope. Little alpaca, our symbol of strength. To keep you alive, we went to great length. We spread your story so far and so wide. Everyone knew you, so Defra, don't hide. Geronimo, Geronimo, our quest for you is eternal rest in peace and in bliss. And so now we leave you with hope in our hearts. We'll always be with you. We are never apart. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm just going to say one more thing, which is about two people who I'm very proud to call friends. The bravest people, some of the bravest people I know. The first one is this lady here. She's taken on the establishment. And in the end, they might have killed Geronimo, but they haven't destroyed her. And she is going to destroy them. And the second person is Pen Farthing, who is I'm also proud to call my friend. I went out on a plane in some crazy mission to the Middle East to bring back 150 animals and Pen and hopefully his staff. You know, that's a long story. We're going to get the staff out, but you know, that's going to be, well, that's our mission is still undone. But you know, we're working on it and we're getting results. And the whole offices of state worked with us on that. I mean, that, you know, I've seen this government work inside. It can work, you know. You can make things move if you've got the right people. I had an amazing team working on our part, amazing team around Helen, with Helen's lawyers and everyone, all the people that defended Geronimo. So, to two of the bravest people on this earth, give them a big round of applause. Helen McDonald and Pen Farthing.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. I want to now hand over.
Can I just say I'm not all that brave. I'm very, very stubborn, and I will not be lied to.
Thank you, Helen. I want to hand over to Peter Martin, the former chair of the Badger Trust. When I came up with a concept and shared it with Ian and Helen about a human shield, he was soon on the scene, organising, getting people there, and he played a key role in making sure the world saw the brutality of when Geronimo was taken and killed. And that is so important, because to bear witness is to know the truth. So thank you, Peter, and everyone. I know you're going to say a few words. Thank you.
Hi, I'm a great believer in keeping things short, so all the points have been covered today. But there's one thing I've never been able to say when I was a member of a charity, because in this country, charities are not allowed to mention politics. Even though we are a democracy, we are banned from talking about politics. Well, I've been fighting the Badger Cull for 9 years, 9 long years. I've been here, God knows how many times. Emily will tell me how many times we've been here. But unless we make Geronimo's death count where it hurts this government, then all of this will be in vain. And it involves nothing more energetic than putting a cross in a box at the right time. This government is, as Ian said, and I'm going to use the same word, psychopathic. This government has presided over a bloodbath the like of which we have never seen before. It is medieval in its scale and its stupidity. The only way we can stop this bloodbath is by making sure that this government never gets back in. That means not just voting, but also pestering MPs. It means organising on the ground. It means being difficult. It means withdrawing your vote and making sure they know you're not going to vote for them. And that's the only way we'll ever get this to actually stick. And the kind of country that we want, that's kind to animals, that is intelligent, that's based on science and not on ideology and rancid politics and culture wars, that's the only way we're going to do it. So thanks very much, everybody, for coming, and I'll hand you back to Dom.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We have another speaker who wants to talk, obviously, more about the Badger Cull and about what we've done so far and what we face in the future. So I just want to hand over. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Hope you can hear me. My name's Julie Douglas. I've been involved protecting badgers not for 9 years, but for over 30 years. So, a bit of a history lesson. So, the first time I attended a demo outside the offices of what was then MAF, so the organisation that Dom and Ian then worked for, it was in the mid-1980s. And we were hopefully thinking, perhaps naively,
that we could persuade the government and MAF that killing badgers didn't work, that it wasn't the way to stop bovine TB spreading in cattle, that I've actually got a report from 1928 which suggests there are means of animal husbandry techniques for stopping the spread of TB in cattle. Now, a few years later, I was involved in the National Federation of Badger Groups. It wasn't the Badger Trust in those days, it goes back so long. And we were told to stand down while the randomised badger culling trial of the early 1990s took place. We were told that if we allowed 10,000 badgers to be killed, this would prove scientifically that there was no way that killing badgers could meaningfully contribute to the control of TB. So we stood by. We let those animals be killed. We thought the science would prevail. Guess what happened? The trial had to be cut short because Lord Krebs, who was overseeing the science, found out that they were actually making matters worse. And the statement at the end of the truncated trial was that killing badgers can have no meaningful contribution to the control of TB in cattle. That was in the early 1990s. So MAF, Defra, they knew it. They knew it from, 30 years ago? Well, they didn't act on it. Then in 2012, after we'd thought that they couldn't possibly kill badgers anymore. Remember, badgers had been persecuted in the 70s. They were gassed with cyanide gas. Then they were trapped. Then they were shot. Then we were told 2012 there's going to be another Badger Cull. And we thought, you can't do that. You've already been shown. It doesn't work. By 2012, a scientist of my acquaintance, a guy called Dr. Chris Cheeseman, who used to work at OPHA at Woodchester Park, had said he'd actually spoken to a government minister in a Tory government and explained that badgers were not a main contributor to the transmission of TB in cattle. They were irrelevant. And the minister said, yes, Dr. Cheeseman, I appreciate what you're saying, but we have to do something for the farmers. Yeah, they've screwed the farmers. They have their system of test, slaughter, retest, slaughter, 28,000 cattle a year killed for bovine TB. Farmers only paid slaughter weight compensation, doesn't matter if it's a pedigree breeding animal, stuff it. They get screwed, they're on movement restrictions, it doesn't do anything positive for the farmers. So now we're in the 8th year of the Badger Cull. 141,000 badgers killed and counting, because it's already happening. The cull's already started up again. And we know, the figures are showing, everyone else has said it, it makes no contribution to TB in cattle. We know there are ways that Defra could improve the situation for farmers. There are improvements to cattle movement, to cattle testing. I've been told since the 1980s that a cattle vaccine was 12 years away. Hang on, that was like 1985. How many years ago is that? My maths isn't that good, but it's more than 12 years. The excuse always used to be, we were in the EU, and you can't tell the difference between vaccinated flesh from an animal that's been vaccinated against TB and one that's infected. Well, we're not in the EU now, so what's the score? You know, why the delay? We're told that Defra want to use every tool in the toolbox. Well, the only tool in the toolbox doesn't seem to be vaccination, either of cattle, camelids or wildlife. It seems to be just kill everything and stuff the science. Well, that's not on. That's not on anymore. Yeah, tell the truth. Now, we always hear it's trotted out every time a minister or a representative of the NFU or anyone talks about TB. It was trotted out again in the case of Geronimo. TB is a terrible disease. Well, yeah, it used to be a terrible disease. In the days before antibiotics, in the days before BCG vaccinations, 40% of the humans who died of TB in Britain died of TB that they'd caught from drinking unpasteurised milk. Note it's unpasteurised, okay? Now, personally, I'd say go vegan, it's not a problem. Yeah? Now, the other side is all those reactor cattle who are sent for slaughter, 28,000 every year. What happens to their corpses? Well, have you ever eaten food in a school canteen? Have you ever eaten food in a hospital canteen? Do you have a friend who's a prison officer, a probation officer, who might have eaten in a prison canteen? Anyone who's been on a charge, held in a remand centre? They've all eaten meat, if they eat meat, from animals infected with TB. Now, we've heard a lot about tuberculous lesions. It's reckoned that only 40% of the animals who test positive have visible tuberculous lesions. And Defra's own reports say that, oh, they've missed the other lesions, either because they were too small, they were microscopic, or because The vets in the slaughterhouses were having to look too quickly at the corpses, so they couldn't see them. So you've eaten those tuberculous lesions, but on a Freedom of Information request, Defra will say, doesn't matter because you cook the meat anyway. Well, if that wasn't a reason to give up eating meat, I don't know what is. They're yuck factor guys. And finally, I'd like to say, why am I here? And I'm here because of a very good friend of mine, and I can see her in the crowd, and she's a livestock vet. She's called Alice Brough, and she's an absolute star. And she phoned me up one evening, and she didn't know I'd moved to Scotland, but hey, I have, because I used to live just down the road from Helen. And she said, could I get some people out, some people I knew, to come and help Helen, her alpaca angels? And you know what? We did. We got out people who'd been protesting against the Badger Cull. We got out Hunt Sabs. We got out animal rights activists. We got out people who just love animals, and they all became alpaca angels. And as Donna said, we now have a real army to fight Defra and to prove that they have lied. Not just for 4 years, not for 5 years, not for 9 years, not for 35 years, but ever since they were formed as the first Ministry of Agriculture after the Second World War. So we're not going to give up. It's been a long fight, but we're nearly at the end now, and we're not giving up. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah, I just want to say thank you to all the people that will be out in the fields, the Hunt Sabs, the Hunt Monitors, the Badger Protection Groups. You know, year in, year out, there's been 8 years of this tragedy, but those people are out there in the dark and the cold, when everyone is just sleeping at night, not even considering it to a large degree, and they are the front-line defenders of our wildlife, and I'm proud to stand beside them. So let's have a round of applause for all those people. Thank you. Ian, you want to say? You want to say?
Okay, so we've just had a statement emailed from the Chief Veterinary Officer, Christine Middlemiss. Perhaps in response to things that Helen has been and I have been saying.
Going vegan?
She's going to go vegan. So she's welcome to come and speak and put her side of the argument. So remember that Christine previously said that the sensitivity of this, specificity of this test was over 99%. Myself and colleagues, including Professor Ranald Monroe, who's the former head of pathology for Defra, 13 other colleagues, 2 other professors, myself, lots of senior vets, pointed out that the specificity was looking far more like 20%, i.e. only a 1 in 5 chance that Geronimo was positive, and because of his history we knew it wouldn't be positive. So Defra in their statement, Defra in the pathology report, firstly it's Helen's pathology report, it's her private property, it's her DPR. The government doesn't have any right to release her pathology results unless she gives permission. Though, just to clarify, there were no typical TB lesions in that report. No TB lesions, no TB caseous pus-filled lesions. What they're saying is, oh, we found some other little things and we think they might be TB even though they're atypical.
Christine Middlemiss's her conduct has been disgraceful. Not only is she publishing results that is my property, but she knows, and everyone else knows, that Geronimo was never exposed to disease in New Zealand. The evidence is very clear. It always has been. This is more propaganda, more smoke screening, another threat to discredit me. She has violated my right to my results by casting aspersions on something that she doesn't understand. So, let's see what they come up with next, but don't expect them to sit back and say that Geronimo is TB free, because that would not fit with the program, would it?
Okay, so just to clarify, there's a very easy way to solve this. First one is, Christine Middlemiss comes and debates live with me on the news tonight. So, strangely, Christine Middleness, or in fact any other Defra scientist, has never, ever, ever stepped into the ring with me in a live TV media interview. Now, if they've got all the evidence and they're right, why is that? So, just a little bit more information about Geronimo's disgraceful killing and post-mortem. Now, already, they will have run, if they really want to find TB in Geronimo, they will have run an actiphage PCR test, they'll have repeated the IDEX test, the Enfaplex test, they'll have done IDEX, they'll have done actiphage. The other thing, if they want to really know if those lesions that they're calling that are atypical, which are going to be something else, are TB, there's a really simple way to do it. They've already put those tissues in formalin to fix them. They slice them up, look under the microscope. Now, I first diagnosed TB when I was about 23. You stain it with a special stain called Nielsen, and it shows up the pink rods of TB bacteria. They can do that today. If they want to think there's TB, why haven't they done that already? So the other thing, with TB, there's very, very few other conditions that cause the generation of multinucleate giant cells, which are where the way the body walls off the abscess. So that's another thing they can show today, because they've already got these tissues, they've processed them. Come back with those answers by news time tonight, and come and debate with me. Come and debate with Helen. She's good at smashing up senior figures. They think she's just a veterinary nurse. Oh, well, you've got another thing. Come and step in the ring with Helen McDonald. So the challenge to Defra remains, prove it, come and debate with us. Thanks very much.
Yeah, I think, just a final point from me, it's a propaganda war. That's pretty much like, weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. It's not there. We can keep saying it's there, but it wasn't there. I think we'll find that with this TB issue in Geronimo. The government cannot accept they got it wrong. They can't accept they dragged off an animal in front of millions of people, horrifying them and killing them, and not having TB in that animal. But the reality is, no matter what they do, the smoke screen and all the misinformation they put out, and the chief veterinary officer should be ashamed of herself today to put out that statement. Because what it does, it shows that they are desperately trying to hide the truth of what they did. And I presume that the Secretary of State has been on to Miss Middlemass and said, put something out, put something out, put something out. And she's panicked and put something out. But I'm afraid it smells like a big pile of manure. None of us believe it. The media don't believe it. The public don't believe it. Probably most MPs in Parliament don't believe it. I'm pretty certain Boris Johnson bloody doesn't believe it either. Okay? That animal should never have been killed. It was a national disgrace that it was killed. It was killed in such a way that it was barbaric and should never happen in any decent country that values animal welfare. And it's about time the Secretary of State and the Chief Veterinary Officer got off their backsides and became accountable and accepted they got it wrong. And if they have to resign as a consequence, so be it. Thing I will say, because we worked very closely with Mr. Johnson in Downing Street over the last 2 weeks to get Mr. Penn and his animals out of Kabul, and we should have got the people out of Kabul as well if it wasn't for Mr. Wallace spending his time trying to bully me and Penn Farthing across the media where he fell flat on his face. And that will never be forgiven in my mind. But we do know from those discussions that the Prime Minister brought Geronimo up in Canada. He was embarrassed and angry with the way this situation was playing out. He knows it was going to hurt his animal welfare record, and it damn well has. And I'm pretty certain that George Eustace never told him when he was going to go on that farm with those Defra contractors and drag it off. This blows a hole in the animal welfare commitments of this government. It's a national disgrace. It's about time the Prime Minister got control of this. If Eustace has to go, so be it. But they must accept they got this wrong. The British public are disgusted by it, and it should never happen again.
Point. I have been bullied, threatened, intimidated and maligned, discredited for 4 years by this government and its officials. Civil servants, scientists, vets, they have all tried to destroy me. They managed to destroy Geronimo, but they will not destroy me. And like I said to you before, I will not be lied to. And if Christine Middlemiss has not got any more integrity than she has shown today, she can resign as well.
Thank you, all of you. This battle is not over. It's going to play out in politics and the media for a long time to come. So keep coming on the pressure, keep on social media, keep demanding answers, never ever give up. You're the caring, compassionate people in this country that put the great in Britain. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you.